The trade that could break Boston. Jaylen Brown may have just played the best basketball of his life, and somehow that might be the exact reason Boston is ready to move on. That is the part NBA fans cannot ignore. This is not a story about a fading star. This is not a story about a player who lost his edge, lost his confidence, or stopped producing when the lights got bright. This is about a finals MVP, an all-NBA scorer, a 5-time All-Star, and one of the most important Celtics of the last decade, suddenly becoming the centerpiece of one of the loudest trade conversations in the league. And the name on the other side of the rumor makes it even more shocking: Jalen Duren. Boston and Detroit are now being linked in a potential blockbuster that could send Jaylen Brown to the Pistons, while Duren becomes the centerpiece coming back to the Celtics. On paper, it sounds wild. A championship wing leaving one of the NBA's most historic franchises for a young Detroit team. A two-year-old center becoming the key to Boston's next era. Two franchises with very different problems suddenly staring at the same solution. But once you look deeper, the trade stops feeling random. Boston is at a crossroads. The Celtics just watched their season end in a way that left scars. They needed size. They needed paint protection. They needed a stronger interior presence. And after years of building around the wing power of Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown, the front office may now believe the roster needs a different kind of foundation. That is where Duren enters the picture. He is young, physical, explosive, and exactly the kind of big man Boston has been missing. He can finish above the rim, he can control the glass, he can protect the paint. And most importantly, he fits a future where Jayson Tatum returns healthy and needs a powerful center beside him. Not another max salary wing forcing the Celtics deeper into financial pressure. But here is the painful part. Jaylen Brown did everything Boston could have asked from him. When the roster was weakened, he carried the load. When Tatum was unavailable, Brown became the face of the fight. When people questioned whether he could lead as the number one option, he responded with the best season of his career. And now, after proving he could be that guy, his reward may be a trade call. That is what makes this story bigger than basketball. It is about loyalty. It is about business. It is about what happens when a franchise looks at a player who gave them everything and still decides the future might be better without him. For Detroit, the dream is obvious. Pair Jaylen Brown with Cade Cunningham, and suddenly the Pistons are no longer just a young team with potential. They become a real threat in the Eastern Conference. Brown gives them scoring, playoff experience, defense, toughness, and a second star who can create his own shot when the game slows down. For Boston, the dream is colder but just as clear. Trade Brown before the roster becomes too expensive, get younger, get bigger, collect assets, and rebuild the championship formula around Tatum. But every dream has a cost. Detroit may have to give up Jalen Duren, the young big man they developed and the player many fans believed was part of their future. Boston may have to give up a player who helped define an entire era of Celtics basketball. And Jaylen Brown may have to accept that the franchise he once imagined staying with for years has already started imagining life without him. That is why this trade feels so explosive. Because if it happens, nobody walks away unchanged. Boston chooses a new identity. Detroit chooses to accelerate its timeline. Duren becomes the price of ambition. And Brown becomes the superstar who gave Boston his best season. Only to find out the business of the NBA does not always reward loyalty with loyalty. So now the question is simple. Are the Celtics making the smartest move of the decade? Or are they about to make the mistake their fans will never forget? Before we go deeper, let me know where you are watching from. Are you in Boston, Detroit, or somewhere else watching this drama unfold? If you think the Celtics should trade Jaylen Brown, type 1 into the comment. If you think Boston would regret this move, type 2. And if you want more NBA trade drama, player stories, and behind-the-scenes league breakdowns, make sure you subscribe to the channel right now, because this story is only getting started. Why Boston suddenly wants Jalen Duren? For the Celtics, this entire conversation begins with one painful truth. Boston did not lose because Jaylen Brown forgot how to be great. Boston lost because the roster around its stars no longer looked complete. That is why Jalen Duren mattered. When people hear Brown for Duren, the first reaction is emotional. How could Boston even think about moving a player who helped deliver a championship, carried the team through a broken season, and still looks like one of the best wings in the NBA? But front offices do not only think emotionally, they think in timelines, contracts, roster balance, playoff matchups, and the kind of problems that destroy a team when the postseason slows everything down. Boston's problem was clear. They needed size, they needed force, they needed someone who could live in the paint, protect the rim, rebound through contact, and give Jayson Tatum a different kind of partner when he returns healthy. For years, the Celtics were built around elite wings, switchable defenders, spacing, and shot creation. That formula won them a title. But the league changes fast, and when your front court starts looking thin, every weakness becomes louder in May and June. Duren gives Boston something Brown cannot give them, a true interior anchor. He is not just a young center with potential, he is a physical presence who can change the geometry of the floor. When Duren rolls to the rim, defenses have to react. When he attacks the glass, opponents have to put bodies on him. When guards get beaten at the point of attack, he can be there as the last line of protection. That is the kind of player Boston has been missing since its championship roster started getting stripped down, and the Celtics know it. This is the part fans may not want to hear. Boston's front office can love Jaylen Brown and still believe the roster needs something different. Those two things can be true at the same time. Brad Stevens can respect what Brown has done, understand what he means to the city, and still look at the salary sheet and realize that paying 2 max wings while lacking a dominant big man may not be the cleanest path forward. That is why Duren becomes so tempting. He is younger, he gives Boston positional balance, he could grow next to Tatum instead of forcing the Celtics to keep doubling down on the same expensive structure. If Boston can add draft capital and another useful piece around him, the deal becomes less about losing Brown and more about reshaping the entire roster before it becomes too rigid to fix. Still, there is risk everywhere. Duren is not Jaylen Brown. He does not create his own shot like Brown. He does not carry an offense for long stretches. He does not have Brown's playoff resume or championship scars. If the Celtics trade Brown, they are giving up certainty for structure. They are giving up a proven star for a younger, more balanced plan. And that is the gamble. Boston is not just asking, who is better today? They are asking, what kind of team can we build tomorrow? If the answer is a bigger, younger, more flexible Celtics team around Tatum, then Duren makes sense. But if Brown leaves and Boston suddenly cannot replace his scoring, shot creation, toughness, and late-game confidence, the entire plan could collapse before it ever becomes a new era. That is why this trade is so dangerous, because Duren might be the missing piece Boston has needed for years. Or he might become the player Celtics fans look at and say, we gave up Jaylen Brown for this? Jaylen Brown proved everyone wrong. The cruelest part of this entire story is that Jaylen Brown did not make himself tradable by failing. He made himself impossible to ignore by succeeding. Coming into the season, Boston was supposed to take a step back. The roster was thinner, key veterans were gone, and Jayson Tatum was unavailable for a major stretch. For the first time, Brown was no longer just the co-star. He was the man Boston had to trust every night, and he answered. Brown delivered the best season of his career. He scored with power, created more offense, carried a heavier role, and kept the Celtics dangerous when many expected them to fade. He proved he could lead a team, not just support one. That is what makes the trade rumors feel so sharp. If Brown had struggled, Boston's logic would be easier to understand. But he did the opposite. He gave the Celtics everything they needed. He carried the offense, handled pressure, and showed he could be a true franchise-level player. And yet, after proving his value, his name still ended up in trade talk. To fans, Brown's season looked like a reason to trust him more. To the front office, it may have looked like the perfect moment to sell high. That difference is the heart of this drama. Because in the NBA, sometimes proving your worth does not protect you from being moved. Sometimes it makes your trade value even louder. The collapse that changed everything. Every major trade rumor has a turning point. For Boston, that turning point came in the playoffs. The Celtics had control. They had a 3-1 lead. They had the chance to close the door and move forward. Jaylen Brown was producing, the crowd believed, and the path looked open. Then everything fell apart. Missed shots piled up. The offense froze. The confidence disappeared. Boston did not just lose a series. They suffered a collapse that forced the front office to question the entire roster. Brown was not the problem. That is what makes this complicated. He fought, he scored, he tried to carry the team through the storm, but one star cannot fix every weakness. He could not become the rim protector Boston lacked. He could not solve the front court problem. He could not erase the fact that the Celtics looked too thin, too small, and too vulnerable when the pressure rose. That is where Jalen Duren becomes important. Duren represents the answer to Boston's playoff pain. Size, rebounding, rim protection, physicality, a different kind of foundation next to Jayson Tatum. So when Brad Stevens looked at the collapse, he may not have seen a reason to blame Brown. He may have seen a reason to change the roster around Tatum completely. That is the tragedy. Brown played like a leader, but because the team failed, he became the piece Boston might use to rebuild. And once a franchise starts thinking that way, the relationship is never the same. The trust that may never recover. Trade rumors are not always fatal, but Jaylen Brown's situation feels different. This is not the first time his name has appeared in a major deal. Boston has reportedly considered him in conversations involving superstar-level players before, and each time, even if the logic made sense, the message to Brown became harder to ignore. You matter, but you are not untouchable. That is a painful place for a franchise star to live. Brown gave Boston years of loyalty. He survived criticism, playoff heartbreak, trade noise, and pressure. He helped win a championship. Then, after his best season, he still found himself treated like the price of a bigger plan. From the Celtics' perspective, this is business. They are trying to win. They are trying to build the best possible roster. They are trying to manage contracts, timelines, and championship windows. But from Brown's perspective, the feeling is different. The team keeps imagining a better future without him. That kind of doubt does not disappear easily. Public praise can help, private meetings can help, money can help. But once a player knows the franchise considered moving him, every conversation feels different. If Boston keeps Brown, they cannot just keep him on the roster. They have to rebuild trust. They have to show him he is not just the backup plan because another trade failed because talent can survive rumor. But championship trust cannot survive permanent doubt. Why Detroit sees its moment? For Detroit, Jaylen Brown represents a rare opportunity. The Pistons are no longer just a rebuilding team waiting for the future. They have Cade Cunningham, they have momentum, and they have a young core that has started to believe. But they also have a problem. Cade needs another star. In the playoffs, one creator is not enough. Defenses load up. Possessions slow down. Every weakness gets exposed. Detroit needs a second player who can create his own shot when the game gets tight. That is exactly what Brown gives them. He brings scoring, playoff experience, defense, toughness, and championship credibility. Pair him with Cade, and Detroit suddenly becomes more than a young team with potential. They become a real threat in the Eastern Conference. But the price is serious. Jalen Duren is not just a random trade chip. He is young, talented, physical, and connected to Detroit's future. Moving him would tell the league that the Pistons are done waiting. It would tell Cade that the front office is ready to win now. That kind of move can change a franchise. It can also haunt one. If Brown takes Detroit deep into the playoffs, the trade looks brilliant. If Duren becomes a star in Boston, Pistons fans may never stop asking if the team moved too fast. Still, Detroit may feel this is the moment. Cade is ready. Brown may be available. Duren's contract situation is uncertain. And in the NBA, windows do not stay open forever. Jalen Duren's complicated value. Jalen Duren is the reason this trade feels possible. He is also the reason it feels dangerous. For Boston, he looks like the answer. For Detroit, he looks like a difficult decision. He is young, strong, productive, and exactly the type of center many teams want. But his value is not simple. During the regular season, Duren looked like a rising star. He scored efficiently, rebounded hard, and gave Detroit a physical identity. He looked like a long-term piece next to Cade Cunningham, but the playoffs created doubt. His impact dropped. His limitations became easier to attack. That does not mean he is not special, but it does make the contract conversation harder. Duren's camp can point to the regular season and say he deserves major money. Detroit can point to the playoffs and say he still has more to prove. That gap opens the door. Boston sees a young big man whose situation may be unstable. Detroit sees a chance to turn a difficult contract negotiation into Jaylen Brown. On paper, both sides have a reason to listen, but emotionally, it is not easy. Duren has grown with Detroit. He has chemistry with Cade. Fans see him as part of the future. If he gets moved, it will be another reminder of how cold the NBA can be. 1 year, you are the foundation. The next year, you are the price. That is why Duren is so important. He is valuable enough for Boston to want him, but valuable enough for Detroit to hesitate. And if this deal happens, whichever team guesses wrong will feel it for years. The money behind the drama. Behind every emotional NBA trade story, there is usually a cold spreadsheet waiting in the background. This Jaylen Brown situation is no different. Fans talk about loyalty. Players talk about respect, analysts talk about fit, but front offices also have to talk about salary, tax penalties, contract timelines, roster flexibility, and the harsh reality of the modern CBA. That is where Boston's problem becomes bigger than one player. The Celtics are expensive. Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown together represent a massive financial commitment. In a perfect world, that is not a problem. Stars cost money. Championship teams pay elite players. If the roster around them is deep, healthy, and balanced, 2 max-level players can still be the foundation of a title team, but the new NBA makes that harder. The second apron has changed the way contenders operate. It punishes expensive teams, it limits flexibility, it makes trades more complicated, it makes roster building feel like walking through a locked hallway with fewer doors every year. Boston already felt that pressure when key championship pieces had to be moved or replaced. The team did not lose depth by accident. The financial system squeezed them. That is why Brown's contract matters. It is not just about whether he is worth the money, he is an elite player. He has proven that. The question is whether Boston can build the right team while paying him and Tatum at the top of the market. If the answer is yes, then trading Brown becomes reckless. If the answer is no, then keeping him becomes dangerous. That is the uncomfortable middle. Brad Stevens has to think beyond emotion. He has to ask whether a roster led by Tatum and Brown can still have enough shooting, enough defense, enough size, and enough reliable depth to survive 4 playoff rounds. If too much money sits at the top and the supporting cast gets thinner, the Celtics may keep their stars but lose their margin for error. And Stevens already said that margin needs to get bigger. That phrase matters because it reveals how Boston views the roster. The Celtics do not believe they are impossibly far away. They believe the structure needs adjustment. Bigger margin means more ways to win when shots do not fall. Bigger margin means more size when opponents attack the rim. Bigger margin means more lineup options when injuries hit. Bigger margin means not depending on Brown to rescue every broken possession while the front court gets exposed. Duren offers a different financial and basketball path. He would not be cheap, but he is younger and fills a more specific roster need. If Boston can receive Duren, picks, and possibly another rotation piece, the Celtics may feel they have converted one expensive star into multiple tools. That is not an easy sell to fans, but it is exactly how front offices try to extend a championship window. Still, there is a warning sign. You cannot spreadsheet your way into replacing Jaylen Brown's heart, pressure, experience, and shot making. Numbers can tell you salary flexibility matters. They can tell you roster balance matters. They can tell you a center is needed. But numbers cannot guarantee that the next version of the team will have the same fight, the same edge, or the same ability to survive when playoff possessions become emotional. That is why this decision is so big. Boston is not only choosing between Brown and Duren, they are choosing between 2 philosophies. One says, keep proven star power and figure out the rest later. The other says, reshape before the cost of waiting becomes too high. Both paths make sense. Only one can be chosen. The 3 endings, nobody can ignore. There are 3 ways this story can end. The first is that Jaylen Brown stays in Boston. This is the ending many Celtics fans want. Boston repairs the relationship, clears the air, and commits again to Brown and Tatum. If both stars are healthy and motivated, the Celtics are still dangerous. They have chemistry, playoff experience, and a championship history together. But the repair has to be real. Brown cannot feel like the backup plan. He cannot feel like Boston only kept him because the right offer never came. If trust is not restored, the season begins with tension. The second ending is the Detroit blockbuster. Brown goes to the Pistons, Duren goes to Boston. Picks and role players complete the deal. Detroit gets the second star next to Cade Cunningham. Boston gets the young center it believes can reshape the roster around Tatum. This is the cleanest break, but it is also the biggest gamble. If Brown shines in Detroit and Boston struggles, Celtics fans will be furious. If Duren becomes the perfect front court anchor, Boston will look smart. Every highlight, every playoff game, and every loss will become part of the debate. The third ending is limbo. Brown stays, but nothing is fixed. Detroit does not meet Boston's price. Boston does not find another deal. Everyone says the right things publicly, but the tension remains. That may be the worst path, because unresolved NBA drama follows a team everywhere. Every loss becomes a headline. Every quiet interview becomes a theory. Every missed pass becomes a clip. Boston needs clarity. If they keep Brown, they must fully commit. If they trade him, they must get a return strong enough to justify ending an era. What they cannot do is pretend nothing has changed. What this trade would really mean. This story is bigger than one trade. It is about the hardest truth in the NBA. Loyalty and winning do not always lead to the same decision. Boston can respect Jaylen Brown and still consider moving him. Detroit can value Jalen Duren and still wonder if Brown gives them a better chance to win now. Brown can understand the business and still feel hurt. Duren can want to be part of Detroit's future and still become the piece that brings in a superstar. Nobody is completely wrong. The Celtics are trying to protect their championship window. They have Tatum, financial pressure, roster holes, and a fan base that expects banners. They cannot ignore those realities, but Brown's side matters too. He gave Boston years of loyalty. He became a champion. He carried the team when the roster was weakened. He proved he could lead. And after all that, seeing his name in trade talks has to feel personal. That is the human cost of NBA business. Detroit also faces a major lesson. Keeping Duren means trusting the young core. Trading for Brown means pushing the timeline forward and accepting real expectations. Patience can become stagnation, but aggression can become regret. That is why timing matters. If Boston trades Brown, the return must be huge. Duren alone cannot be enough. The Celtics need size, picks, depth, and a clear plan to replace Brown's scoring. If Detroit trades for Brown, they must be ready to win now. This would no longer be a young team with potential. This would become a team expected to challenge the East. For Jaylen Brown, the ending should come with respect. If he stays, Boston must fully commit to him. If he leaves, the franchise should honor what he gave them. He helped define an era. He became a champion. He proved he could lead. That legacy does not disappear because trade rumors got loud. The bigger lesson is simple. Great teams are not built on talent alone. They are built on trust, communication, sacrifice, and timing. Basketball is a business, but the best organizations never forget the human side. So whether Brown stays in Boston or starts a new chapter in Detroit, this decision will reveal everything. It will show what the Celtics truly value. It will show how bold the Pistons are ready to be. And it will show whether Jaylen Brown's next chapter is unfinished business in green or a new mission in a city ready to believe again. Now I want to hear from you. If Boston should trade Jaylen Brown, type 1. If the Celtics would regret letting him go, type 2. If Detroit should trade Jalen Duren for Brown, type 3. And if both teams should walk away, type 4. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more NBA trade drama, player stories, and behind-the-scenes breakdowns.